Okay, we'll come back. This is chapter 3, DHCP for the CIN 2003 course. Okay. Deploying and configuring DHCP services. So in this chapter, we are going to learn about DHCP, how we configure it, and we will do a lab on that also, and learn about relay agents. What is DHCP on Azure? We will do Microsoft Azure. So DHCP is Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. What does it do? It will automatically configure the IP address and other TCP/IP settings on network. You will create a pool, and then you will assign IP addresses from that pool. It saves time and prevent configuration errors, duplication, giving the same IP address to different computers. It consists of 3 parts: server application, client installed on the client side, and you need the communication protocol. We have 3 different types of IP address allocation methods in DHCP. Dynamic allocation, this is the normal one. So you assign IP address from the pool or from the scope. Scope is a range of IP addresses. Okay, and you give a duration or length, lease time we call it. Okay. We have also automatic allocation. Here, the DHCP permanently assign an IP address to a client computer from a scope. It is actually dynamic, but the lease time is indefinite. And then we have manual allocation. Here, you do permanently assign a specific IP address to a specific computer on the network. It is called a reservation. Okay. You use manually allocated address for computers that must have the same IP address all the times. All right. Like what? Give me an example. Your printer, web server. You don't want it to change every time, right? The IP address. Every time you will search for the printer, unless you know the IP address, you can send the prints to it. Only the server. Desktop, you don't let it change, no problem. Okay? Only important servers, important computers, printers. Okay? Something that you are sharing. Yeah, maybe. Yes, you are right. Okay. Vendor information extension. We have subnet mask for that IP address. So you can give also the subnet mask when you give the IP address. You have the router or gateway. You will specify the gateway, the DNS, the host name, and the domain name. We will do this in the lab, inshallah. Okay. Also, your DHCP server, you should specify what is the IP address, what is the gateway, things like that also. DHCP also gives parameters that govern the DHCP lease negotiation and renewal process. Okay, we said that it will lease the IP address for a certain duration, right? By default, it is 8 days. 8 days? 8 days. Some extensions of the requests is requested IP address, it is used by the client to request a particular IP address lease time. So these are parameters. And we have server identifier, specifies the IP address of the server involved in the DHCP transaction. We have also parameter request list used by the client to send a list of requested configuration options identified by their code numbers to the server. We have also the message, carries an error message from the server to the client, okay, in a DHCP and AK message. These are some messages that the DHCP uses, okay? You need to know some of these messages, all right? We have also T1 time. T1 is when your time reaches 50% of the lease. And if it is 10 days, 50% is what? 5 days. Okay. When you reach T1, this is called renewing state. If nothing happens and you reach T2, which is 87%.
87?
Yeah. Yani 8 days and a half, 8 days and 0.7. Then you enter the rebinding state. That's critical. You have to do something. So for renewal, when the DHCP client reaches the 50%, the client enters the renewing state. And it starts sending DHCP request. The client sends DHCP request. And it will send them as a unicast to the DHCP server that gave you the original IP address. If everything is okay, it will be renewed. Okay. Also, when you restart your computer will have to renew its lease. If the server does not respond by T2, yani rebinding time, the client enters the rebinding state and begins transmitting DHCP request broadcast to everyone. Khalas. I have to find someone. To all the servers, in an attempt to solicit an IP address assignment from any DHCP server. If the server receives the DHCP request and it approves the lease renewal request, or it disapproves, which is DHCP and AK, and negative acknowledgement, negative acknowledgement. I don't want to renew your lease time. Khalas, enough. Okay. This will terminate the lease. If the client receives no response to DHCP request by the time of the lease expires, or if it receives a negative acknowledgement, the client releases the IP address and returns to the initial state, and all TCP IP communication then ceases. If you have internet connection, it will finish, because you cannot have internet connection without IP address. Okay, except the transmission of DHCP discover broadcast. All right. The DHCP communication protocol defines 8 different message types. We have just talked about them. DHCP discover, used by client to request configuration parameter from a DHCP server. DHCP offer, used by server to offer IP address to the client. DHCP request, we already mentioned, it's used by the client. It can be unicast or unicast at T1, broadcast at T2. DHCP decline, used by clients to reject an offered IP address. DHCP acknowledge, by the server to acknowledge the request. Acceptance, to renew. DHCP negative acknowledge used by server to reject acceptance. DHCP release used by client to terminate an IP address lease. Let's say I have an IP address, I want to terminate it. The message is DHCP release. DHCP inform used by clients to obtain additional TCP IP configuration parameters from a server. Now what we explained here, they have done it in a diagram. If you look at this diagram, this is just explanation of this one. But some people, they like to put it in a diagram. So you can see here, your server client will send broadcast, the server will receive it. Okay, either it will offer, okay, if the client accept, okay, then the client will request it, DHCP unicast request. All right, and life is good. When it comes to the, if it is refused by the server, it will send message which is DHCP and AK, negative acknowledgement. And so, any questions about this? Wait, how do we design our DHCP server? Where do we put the DHCP server? Do we just install it any place in the network? There are certain designs. Okay. By default, by theory, DHCP server can support many thousands of clients. But practically, you have to be careful about the bandwidth, the speed. So virtually all enterprise networks require more than one DHCP server. DHCP relies on broadcast messages, which have limitations, of course. Broadcast has a problem. Why? Because your router will not allow the broadcast. You remember you studied this in your networking fundamentals? Router block broadcast. So one of the design of DHCP is distributed DHCP infrastructure. Distributed meaning that I have a DHCP server in each subnet of my network, each part of my network. That's why it's called distributed. What are the advantages? Your clients will have access, correct? And you do not have to worry about DHCP traffic because the traffic will be in each subnet, local. Okay. What is the disadvantage? Cost and installation time. You have to install DHCP server in each network. Okay.
Side cost? High cost?
Cost and time. Installation. You have to install in each subnet. This is distributed. Here you see you have DHCP server in each network. Okay. The other method is centralized. I will have one DHCP server. Look here. And in the other subnets, what I will put, I don't have to buy this. I will put an agent. It's a software. You add it to the server. It's called server with DHCP relay agent. Relay agent will allow. وين جبتها؟ وين أنا did I say that؟ لا صملة درجة ولا؟ Relay agent meaning that it will take the information from the server, from the DHCP server. It's like an agent branch. But you don't have to buy a full DHCP server, just an agent. Why? because the router will block the broadcast. So the agent will solve this problem. Okay. You see here I have DHCP server, and then here I have relay agents. Okay. The distributed and centralized. Here, this is the centralized. What is the advantage of centralized? Reduce administration cost and headache. Okay. Few DHCP servers, easy to manage and monitor. What is the disadvantage? Too much load on the server and traffic because the message is going from the central server, correct? The distributed and centralized DHCP infrastructure represents an extremes and opposite ends of the design spectrum. So we have something in the middle. It's called hybrid. Hybrid uses multiple DHCP servers on different subnet, but does not necessarily require a DHCP server on every subnet. This is the hybrid. That's the best solution if you are beginning. It's something in the middle. Okay. So these are the three methods: centralized, distributed, and hybrid. Any questions? This is the centralized. Okay. Now there are some good recommendations or best practice to regulate or reduce DHCP network traffic. Several factors can affect network traffic, and you can, okay, control this by, first of all, place your DHCP server close to the clients. And this is my building. I put my DHCP server inside the building. I don't put it remote because there will be huge traffic. Adjust the lease duration so there are fewer renewals. And if I find that it's okay to make it the lease duration 20 days instead of 8 days, do that. Okay. Or sometime you need to make the lease duration unlimited. To deploy a DHCP server, we have to install the role. We will do this in the lab. So you will go to add roles and services and then choose DHCP. Okay. After we do that, we need to create a scope, and we will do this in the lab using the MMC. Okay. MMC stands for Microsoft Management Console. These are easy steps. Don't worry. The screen will look like this. Okay. Once you install the DHCP, you can get a screen like this. Then we'll create a scope, give it a name, give the IP addresses, give the parameters, and go. Okay. These are the screenshots. You're gonna scroll. You can give the start of the scope, the end of the scope. What are the exceptions? Okay. What is the gateway? What is the DNS? We will do it in the lab. It's easy. Trust me. We'll do it more than one time. I promise you. كم مرة سألني. Relax, listen. Don't worry. It will be easy. Don't worry. It will not be hard. Hello? Promise you. Okay. This is the duration. 8 days. محمد شايف الديوريشن عندك هناك؟ Can you see it؟ ما شاء الله عليك. اوكي. انا هون مو شايفه ترى. بس هي 8 days, trust me. It is 8 days. Okay, don't forget that, all right? And then once you finish, it will ask you, do you want to configure the options? You say yes, and we'll do that. Once we do it one time, we'll find it easy. This is very important step at the end. You need to activate the scope. If you don't activate it, it will not work. It's up to you in the exam, but you will lose some marks. Okay. Of course, you need to activate. The options, there are two types of options for the DHCP. We have scope options. This is supplied only to the DHCP clients receiving addresses from a particular scope. Okay. Then there are server options supplied to all DHCP clients receiving addresses from the server. Okay, these are the two kinds of DHCP server options. To configure these options, this is the screen. This is not part of the lab, okay? But this is the screen to do it. We can create also a reservation. This is a manually allocated address. It is used for computers whose IP address must remain the same, static, like, remember I told you, domain controller, DNS server, internet web server, maybe network printer. Okay. Allows you to manage all of your IP addresses through the DHCP. Tamam.
So until so you submit. Until so you submit.
Subnet.
ولا مو موجود.
Subnet mask ولا IP.
Once you give the IP address, the scope, then you give the extra information, the subnet mask, the DNS, and the gateway. Okay. We will not do subnetting. Subnetting you have done, I think, previous course, right? We will not do it again here. If you like to do subnetting, then you need to do an advanced networking course. Okay, but in this course, we are not going to do subnetting and calculations. Okay. To create a reservation, you use this, but you need to give the MAC address of the computer you want to reserve. To deploy a DHCP relay agent, if you are using centralized or hybrid, okay, you can do this, which we will not do in the lab also. But many routers nowadays, they are capable of functioning as DHCP relay agent, but when they cannot, you can configure Windows Server 2019 computer to function as a relay agent. These new routers, they can function as a relay agent also. And it can manage, if you have 4 computers connected to the router, it will provide them with the IP. You don't need to buy a server also.
Let's go.
Yeah, it's done inside the router. Okay, this is the summary here.